Aye.
Short Bus Debate Club. It's a bus rolling.
I can get on board. Hello, I'm Darren Jolly.
It's time to get this short bus started. So let's roll. And on with the show. Hello, everyone. This is Brian Courtney with Short Bus Debate Club. As always, Darren Jolly is in the room with me.
Hi.
Today, we've got a couple of guests with the Socialist Party of the United States of America. We have their candidates that are going to be running in the executive branch. Bill or William Bill Stodden will be running for president, and his running mate Stodden Cholensky will be running for VP. Hi, Bill, Stephanie, how are you today?
We are alive. I mean, speaking for myself, I'm alive. I'm vertical. That's good.
I'm doing great. I'm glad we could get on here with you guys.
Yeah, we are too. Because for some reason it was really strange. Most of the interviews that we had would have been considered more of a conservative or right-leaning sort of party. Not too many of the left sort of parties wanted to participate, and I don't know if that's because everyone is woke and the name of the podcast offended them, or if they just thought we were too small and they didn't want to waste their time. But we were really excited when you guys got back to us and said you wanted to get on the air. So
I listened to some of the episodes in that series, the original set of interviews that you did, and I think that in that case we didn't know that the invitation had been sent out because we were in the process of electing our national officers, and so there was some turnover right about then that we ran into, that we weren't able to answer that until after we had Stephanie and me in place at the convention. And so at that point, then I reached out and we were able to touch base with you guys.
Awesome. So we're going to just jump right in it. So the Socialist Party USA, like, paint me a picture, give me an idea of what the main platform of the Socialist Party USA is.
Well, the Socialist Party USA primarily focuses on workers taking over the means of production. It's almost like a cliche thing to say, but as a matter of fact, that's what we were defining socialism as, where workers control their own lives, their own careers, their own workplaces, and that kind of stuff. And they basically will get together and decide for themselves not only what they're going to produce, but more or less what we need in society, and then orient society and our economy toward those ends. We won't necessarily have a society which is by and for the benefits of capital after a socialist revolution, or whatever word you want to use. We will, however, have a society where the economy, all of the various social institutions, churches, schools, hospitals, and these other things that we consider as all institutions within our society, will be reoriented toward the benefit of the society. The society, it makes up the same word that is the base of socialism, just like capital makes up the base of the word capitalism. So in our society, we have the society running the society for its own benefit, whereas in capitalism, we have society being run by and for the benefit of capital, at which point we, the workers, are being left out. So I think that that's what the Socialist Party is about at the very, philosophical foundation. And upon that, we build a number of other things, which Stephanie can also speak pretty well on with regard to feminism, environment, intersectionality, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, one thing we like to say is we are for economic democracy as well as political democracy. The powers that be, the people who control the vast majority of wealth and power, they really would like most working class people to believe that the only options we have are the GOP's version of capitalism versus the Democrats' version of capitalism, which is just slightly more regulated with slightly more social programs. So they seem very willing to give those up if they need to. So what we're offering is something entirely different, which is where the means of production are owned and controlled by working class people. And one way that we differ from other socialist parties is, for example, we are a political party that runs candidates independent of the two parties of capitalism, Republicans and Democrats. Unlike DSA, they are a political organization, not a political party, and obviously they do support Democrats. We are a socialist feminist party. We are intersectional socialist feminists. So that distinguishes us in that we are not the type of feminism, the kind of bourgeois, liberal, white feminism where, I guess through my eyes, it seems almost like they want to diversify the people that are oppressing working people. You know, they want more women to be CEOs, but they don't want to actually interrogate and upset the power balance that is keeping people oppressed. As intersectional feminists, I don't think if you support capitalism, you can actually be intersectional, because you are not looking at the intersection of class, which I would argue is the most important intersection. And we also reject the idea that class is the only dynamic that matters. That's just simply not true. We are a grassroots party, meaning that the power in our party, it's not top down. It's very, even the way we run our organization and indeed our campaign is very democratic. Our party is very local based. We are a multi-tendency party, meaning that we do have, of course, our statements of principles. And if you want to know more a little bit about what we stand for, that would be a good starting point if you're looking for something to read. But as long as you agree to this statement of principles, you can be a member, and you can differ with other party members and leadership on other things. It isn't as if leadership dictates what everyone else in the party has to believe. There's a lot of discussion and, of course, very lively debate about that. And the leadership in the party doesn't hold a lot of power. Just like socialism is, we try to make sure the power in the hands of the people. So that is one thing that drew me to the Socialist Party, as I'm kind of a misfit politically. I'm more of an anarcho-communist. So I wouldn't fit in a Leninist party, obviously. But yeah, I think we occupy a very unique place on the left, and our campaign really gives me hope. But obviously I'm very biased.
The multi-tendency part. So when I was doing my homework and I was listening to, like, you made very clear distinctions between economic democracy and social democracy, and the refusal to align with the two-party position. So, but when you say multi-tendency, you're basically saying it's not like you're a bunch of, dogmatic Marxist, Leninist, or Maoist or something like that. It's that you have people that, like you said, there's a statement of purpose. You all can agree on the statement of purpose, but how that is like iterated through each individual actor to be unique and how they relate to it or something. Is that what you mean by multi-tendency?
I think that the best way to describe it is we have Marxist Leninists, or people that associate themselves with Marxist Leninism, in the party, as well as people who will associate themselves with, more like myself, a utopian socialist position or an ethical socialist position. I think that the point that the multi-tendency aspect of the party makes is that we all have a role to play within the revolution. There's not actually there's not a correct dogma of socialism. I think that we approach socialism perhaps maybe differently from a hard Leninist cadre party, in that we don't have a group of people at the very top making the decisions and expecting all the people to go along with it. In some parties, they will allow the members to participate in that decision making, but then once the decision's made, there's no deviance from the party line. Trying to get the members of the Socialist Party to do something like that would be an act of complete futility and absurdity, because we believe that the best way to socialism is whatever, I'd probably say whatever happens to work at this particular time, given our principles, our platform, as long as it conforms to what our principles are as a party and our adherence to the ideas of socialism. For example, we're not going to say that working within the Democratic Party works, and so we're going to abandon socialism, because we know that doesn't work. We know that is a path to utter failure. But working with, like, for example, the Greens on a tactical alliance, or working with members of the DSA or something like that to get a march or a teach-in together or something like that, we're willing to do that. We think that working with the DSA in some situations would be okay. But as long as the DSA is telling us that in order to work with us, we have to adhere to the Democratic Party, or we have to support Joe Biden, well, that obviously will preclude any action. So multi-tendency, it gives us a sort of flexibility that the more maybe Leninist or cadre parties, maybe Maoist parties or whoever, don't necessarily have, simply because of the fact that we don't require anyone to adhere to any particular dogma. This is not to say that people don't support Marxist-Leninism within the Socialist Party. They do, but at some point they're going to get to the point where they're saying, well, this is totally, as far as tactics are concerned, this is totally against what I believe, so I'm just not going to be part of the Socialist Party. It's not us at that point telling them they have to leave because they don't support the dogma that we do. It's them deciding that maybe the Socialist Party isn't a good fit for them. But they're certainly willing to stay. They're certainly willing to work with us, and they're certainly willing to continue the general movement for leftism and for socialism and anti-capitalism, all the various liberation movements and stuff like that that we would tend to support. They're certainly willing to work with us, and we're happy to work with them as long as we keep that core idea of multi-tendency and that we're going to do what we can to get socialism, and we'll work with it. Those people who want to work with us, we're certainly not going to surrender our platform to work with someone. We're not going to accept that condition, but we're multi-tendency, so we might have people that sympathize with that platform within our party. As long as they can continue to be okay working with us, we're happy to continue to work with them. If we got Stalinists who believe that the whole point of their existence is to take over our party, they might have a short time in our party. They might have a short life within the party. They might find themselves heading on to greener pastures because a lot of people will oppose something like that. But for the most part, we don't really have any kind of like dogmatic or ideological requirements to be part of the Socialist Party, except for, of course, our principles and our platform.
Acceptance of the statement of principles is key. I often say my plan for revolutionary change in the world, it doesn't require converting billions of people to every aspect of my ideology. The working class itself is multi-tendency. So I believe the working class deserves a multi-tendency party. Any realistic plan for change requires acceptance of the diversity of human ideals rather than converting everyone to Marxist-Leninism or our very specific views. I'm sure many people here see it on the left where we're always fighting with each other and there's all this power struggle. And in the SP, you do see people from diverse backgrounds working together. We do not compromise with capitalists or bigots. Obviously, there are real places where we have to draw lines, but we do have a diversity of opinions working towards these common goals. And another thing that might distinguish us is we are not entryist. When we work with another group in coalition, we work with them because we agree and want to support and further the cause. We don't go in trying to convert them to our ideology or trying to win members over. At least that's not our main purpose. And I think that mindset, it really does sow distrust, and it's one reason socialists have gotten a bit of a tarnished reputation in some activist circles, because some of us do engage in these tactics, and to me it's the opposite of solidarity. So if this is something that you have been soured on, the Socialist Party might be a good fit for you.
Okay. I know kind of through the way you guys answered that first question, you probably touched on some of this to some degree, but question number 2 is, if you had the power to resolve the following issues, what would be the first issue that you took care of? And then how do you think the Socialist Party can address these issues? So the issues are Social Security, the environment, education, healthcare, foreign policy, and the U.S. economy.
Well, I don't want to say that the economy is underneath everything. I think that the economy is pretty important, though, because you can't really fight for a clean environment without fighting for massive change or revolutionary change in the economy. It doesn't really make any sense, because if you leave capitalism in place and just focus on coming up with a cleaner environment, capitalism is the reason why the environment isn't clean in the first place. So you can't really fight for a clean environment without also at the same time addressing capitalism. Just like you can't fight for healthcare without addressing capitalism, because capitalism requires that a certain number of people be sick in order for us to count sick people as a GDP growth. you can't fight for good education without addressing capitalism, because capitalism requires a certain number of people to be undereducated so that we have a constant supply of undereducated workers in the society that can be exploited easily and inexpensively. Social Security and foreign policy, all of those things are also related to capitalism. So I think that in order to answer this question, it's kind of a difficult question to rank, because all of them have to be addressed at the same time. And if you address one of them, you can't address that one effectively without addressing the other ones. I mean, it's like I always present it as an analogy of putting the cart before the horse. We can't fight against misogyny or hatred of women, or we can't fight against racism in society without also addressing the exploitation which is inherent in capitalism. You have to address them at the same time. If you address racism without addressing capitalism, you're just going to get racism again in 20 years when the people who are still benefiting from exploitation and division among people go back and reverse all the gains that you've made on race issues. We saw that with the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s being rolled back, and voting rights and all this other stuff being rolled back over the last 50 years. Abortion the same way, being rolled back and rolled back and rolled back, because you're not addressing the problem that caused those issues in the first place. And so I think that we have to take an all of the above approach. Addressing just the economy isn't going to fix the environment, obviously. It's not going to stop racism or anything like that. But you can't really address one without addressing the other.
No, that's fair. And that's
Yeah.
why I, kind of led with, if you had the power to change it and could actually change it, then, stack rank them. But
Yeah, well, if I could wave my hand and magically resolve it, I would take capitalism out of healthcare and create a national health service. I'd take capitalism out of the economic production model and have a production model that was designed to build and renew the environment instead of destroy it. I would take capitalism out of the education system and make it good education where teachers are paid well and people have the opportunity to learn the truth rather than whatever's in our history books. If I had that magic wand, I would love to do all that stuff. That'd be fantastic.
I like this question because it does force people to show what they value. And if you are going into politics and you want to lead a political movement, you have to make those tough choices. These choices are actually a lot easier for socialists because we don't support US imperialism and we don't have to fund the US military to hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. So we have a lot of wiggle room to work with. And obviously the US military is a huge employer. We would need a jobs guarantee and massive jobs programs to replace those jobs. But ultimately, like Bill said, everything does ultimately go back to capitalism. And that's why we ranked economy first, because when we hear economy, we think capitalism. We absolutely have the ability to provide everyone on earth the basics of survival, not just the basics of survival, but a decent life. We don't, because we have a wasteful and incredibly unequal system that values profit over everything else, and the decisions are made by the wealthy and powerful. So when we get rid of that, that's how we deal with all the rest of the issues. One reason I don't support the welfare state capitalism, which is also sometimes known as the Scandinavian model of socialism, is because although these systems would lead to a better quality of life for working people in the United States, if we implemented it here, they're built upon the exploitation of the global South. So in order to accept such a model, I'd have to be fine with that exploitation, just not as much in my country, and I'm simply not. I'm not willing to make that compromise. So yes, I'm not going to say that bigotry would go away if capitalism didn't exist. It existed before capitalism. I hope it doesn't exist past capitalism, but it probably unfortunately still will. But capitalism really does foster it. The wealthy have always used people's bigotry and fear and hatred to divide working people so that we blame each other rather than blaming the people who make the decisions and who have the power. But it is one of the biggest steps we could take in overcoming white supremacy and misogyny and all the forms of bigotry we see. And you see who pushes this stuff. You see who's attacking trans people as if that's the dire issue that is hurting Americans on an everyday basis because they don't have any answers. And honestly, I don't think I don't think the Democrats have answers either, because they're still supporting the same broken system, just with some social welfare here and there that they dangle in front of people. But they don't have answers, so they lean on that. They lean on the worst aspects of humanity, getting us to hate each other and blaming migrants and the least powerful for the actions of the people in power. It's awful. And I really would like to build a better world where we are cooperative, where we focus on providing for those most in need, and we don't have owning class that lives in obscene luxury while every hour of every day 700 children die of poverty. That's our reality. That's the failure of capitalism. And a recent study also showed that poverty and inequality is one of the biggest causes of death in the United States as far as preventable deaths. It's on par with things like cancer and heart disease. Pollution as well is also getting worse, obviously, but these things are not going to get better. Capitalism cannot be reformed. It cannot fix itself. And there is a better way, and that's really what we want to get across.
So you had mentioned something, Bill, about how you were going through the process of dealing with we weren't in contact with you really quick because you were going through the process of getting your national delegates together. How does the Socialist Party USA, how did you all get chosen to be the president VP candidate? How do you develop that party structure internally?
Sure. Well, you may know from your studies that we are a party that has a legacy that stretches back to the rather successful Eugene Debs campaign in the 19 teens and 20s, through Norman Thomas and through various other candidates for president. We have not only run our own candidates rather successfully, but we have supported candidates from other parties in the unity ticket a lot of times. I would say probably 2000, when Dave McReynolds was running for president, for example, he earned enough votes in Florida, which was larger than the margin that Al Gore lost by. I mean, we've successfully done this, and we've done it for a very long time over our 100+ year history, 124 years of history. And the way we're doing it now, and this is, I think, how it's been done as long as I've been with the party, is that a candidate will, like myself, will submit a questionnaire that the national committee or someone makes up. They'll basically hire or appoint a search committee of people to go out and find candidates who might be interested in running, and then that committee will approach them and give them a questionnaire. I filled out a questionnaire, and the questionnaire had I don't know, probably 8 or 9 questions on it. Those questions not only cover things like what my beliefs and stances are on various issues, but also more organizational questions like, would I be able to travel? Do I have any other fundraising abilities or skills outside of this that would make our campaign a little bit more viable? That questionnaire is submitted to the party for anyone who's coming to our convention to look at. And this year in 2023, we had a virtual convention online where we all met on Zoom because it was just easier to plan it that way than to try to task a local with coordinating everything necessary for an in-person convention. We do have in-person conventions, and God willing, we'll have in-person conventions again in the future. This year, we just decided to do it virtually, and so more people could attend. And we didn't have put a burden on a local to actually get it all together in their area. So those people who attended the convention then got to see our questionnaire. And once we had all of the people, and I think that there was probably, I want to say 5 or 6, maybe 6 people that submitted a questionnaire. Then during the convention, some member who was a seated delegate at the convention made a nomination of one or several people to be considered as a candidate. So once we were in the convention, they had, in order to be eligible, you had to fill out a questionnaire so people could take a look at it. But then you had to be nominated as well within the convention. So most of the people that filled out questionnaires were not actually nominated. In our case, I was nominated. A fellow named Eric Chester, who's a longtime party member, was nominated, and an individual named Jasmine Sherman, who is seeking the nomination on another ticket, wherever she can, also was nominated on the floor of the convention. They asked us questions. We got the opportunity to speak. In my case, my questionnaire pretty much said everything that I was going to say, so I pretty much leaned on that. I mentioned that I probably wouldn't be the best candidate in very certain circumstances to run, and I encourage the convention to consider the request, but also consider everything that the party needs in a presidential candidate. Then Jasmine spoke, and Eric, Comrade Chester, withdrew his name from consideration. So at the end of it, it was a vote on the convention floor between me and Jasmine, and I'm not sure what the discussion was because I excused myself from the convention at that time. They went and had the discussion without me, which is just fine with me. I was perfectly happy to not hear what people had to say. They decided, first of all, to run a candidate, and then at that point, they voted on whether or not it would be me or Jasmine to get the nomination. And at that point, I guess I carried the majority of the convention of people who were voting for, and they told me that I would become the presidential candidate. And basically, some people sometimes want it more. I happen to be the person that the party decided on this year, but I'm sure that Stephanie will reiterate this. Our presidential election is about building the movement. It's not necessarily about me specifically. It could have been me or anybody else who got the nomination. But our whole job this year and pretty much every year until we're actually able to mount a serious threat to the two-party system somehow is to raise awareness about the party and about issues around socialism, to raise awareness about the concept of socialism so that people find out about it. It gets people involved and gets people excited about socialism. Hopefully we'll get them to join our party and to support us at the polls, so that we can demonstrate to people that not only is there an alternative, but it's an alternative that you may or may not already agree with. If you happen to already agree with it, then we encourage you to join the party. Hopefully we build some locals out of this. Hopefully we get some more members out of this. And hopefully we bring socialism into the conversation. And that's what our real goals are. I think that the more support we have, the more people are talking about us, the better we're going to be to get socialism. But like I said, it's not really about me. It's, we know Cornel West, he's a really big name. He's very famous. We know Jill Stein, she's very famous. To some degree, we know Claudia's name. She's very famous within certain circles. I'm just a guy, I'm a working guy. I have trouble paying my rent sometimes. I got 2 kids that I'm raising. One of them is about to go to college. And it really isn't about me. It's about the party wanted to have someone going out there and talking about socialism and discussing this. In this particular year, it just happened to be my job to do.
So with the process, do all of the members do the nomination and then the delegates actually end up voting for the person who ends up running, or is it all of the members throughout the entire process? How?
I can go for that.
Okay.
Go for it.
I've been to most of the Socialist Party conventions over the last, this century, honestly. I've served on the NC for well over a decade. So the basic party structure is we have the National Committee, and then we have the National Executive Committee, which makes up party officers like co-chairs, vice co-chairs, and the secretary. And they meet usually every 2 weeks to do more immediate things. And then the NC meets, I believe, every 4 months. For the convention, which is the highest ruling body of the party, we do that every other year. In presidential years, nominations come from the floor, and Bill mentioned a little bit about the questionnaires. And the delegates from the locals and also at-large delegates vote on that after candidates are allowed to give their but after they give their statements, there's questions, then the National Convention delegation will vote on that.
Okay, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure, because some of the parties we spoke to, it seemed like all of the members were involved in the entire process, and then some of them, it seemed like, they would nominate you and say, "Oh, well, Stephanie, I want you to be on the ticket with Bill," and then you guys would fill out your questionnaire, and then the delegates would vote for who actually ended up getting in. So I just wanted to make sure our listeners understood.
I'm guessing there aren't too many members who, if you want to be a delegate, you're probably going to have a spot at the convention. It isn't a very competitive thing. So any members who want to be involved are likely to be seated at the national convention. So
Pretty open process then.
yes.
It is, and I think that, you know, a lot of parties will have like primaries and stuff like that. I don't think our party is big enough to sustain something like that. We don't. I know that the Green Party, for example, does primaries in the states, and they have whole elections there and that kind of thing. There's something to be said about that process because it generates excitement about the race and about the campaign, whereas we do ours at the convention. But we figure that at the convention is a good enough place because, as Stephanie said, anyone that really wants to be part of it actually probably has a really good chance of being part of it. And otherwise, a lot of people who are just at-large members or just pay dues aren't really keyed into it anyway. So the national convention seems like a reasonable place to do it. And the delegates themselves will make a decision whether or not we're even running a campaign. And then after that, who the candidate should be. So I think that in that sense, it's a very democratic process in that everybody has a vote on who the campaign is going to be. Also, I wanted to add one thing that Stephanie, I'm really glad that Stephanie is running as the vice president, but Stephanie ran in a completely separate election. She and I didn't say, hey, let's make a ticket together. So I'm glad. And I wanted Stephanie to run for president too, but Stephanie said she's just going to do vice president. So I'm really glad that they selected you as the vice presidential candidate if they're going to make me be the president. Presidential candidate.
So since we're kind of talking about that, and again, you touched on it based on our last question, but is there a steering committee? Like, does the national committee want you to say these things, you know, when you are on an interview like this? Is there a steering committee, and how strict is the adherence to that party line? I mean, what is it that could get you in trouble or booted off the ticket, or is there anything that the steering committee might do to you?
I'll answer this. I don't know if Stephanie might have a different answer, but from my experience, no. Like, I agreed that I'm going to run on the party's platform and I'm going to run on the party's principles, of course, because I'm a member of the Socialist Party. And so it doesn't make any sense that I wouldn't run on that. But I think that the party has the opportunity to determine at the point of nomination whether or not this individual is planning on running on the party line, so to speak. I don't think there's really a party line. The only thing we have is the principles and our platform. And I plan on doing that. We've actually nominated people that have taken really radical positions in the past, like one individual who it turns out was like anti-abortion. And in this party that don't fly. So they found out his position. He wasn't truthful in disclosing that. And so then they had to have a recall election to pull him off the ticket. And we just ended up not really running a campaign that year. He was still campaigning as a socialist, but the party didn't support him. But there's no, I would say there's probably no mechanism outside of that to force you to say anything or anything like that. We are lucky because we have a campaign cooperative, and our campaign cooperative, it works together to like everything we put out. For example, we run by the collective, and the collective will say yay or nay, change this, we like this, maybe you might want to say it like this. But it's a collective that is there to bring their experience and their insights to our campaign, rather than they keep telling us that it's our campaign and all this other stuff. But I really value their input because I've never run for president before. I don't have any idea how to do this. But it's really good to have that group of people there to help us stay on the straight and narrow and to help us stay with what the party wants to do. And we always keep in mind that everything we're doing has not only the goal of getting the campaign, out there in the public, but also building the party. So since that's our overall strategic goal with this campaign, it makes sense that we're going to campaign on the party's platform and the party's principles.
So you mentioned that somebody had to go to a recall vote because he was pro-life or anti-abortion, depending on, which party you're in, I guess. Is there any other sticking point like that pro-life position that you could think of where a recall might be in the future for a candidate if it came out that he
I
or
can
she was that.
I could take
Sure.
that if you want.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We've been very fortunate for the most part. We've had candidates that honestly represent our platform. And if there are certain things that they disagree on, like, for example, we don't have an official stance on vaccination, or some members disagree on something like nuclear power. There are things where there's disagreement. For me, I'm a scientist as well, so I differ a little bit with the party when it comes to genetically modified organisms and labeling. So usually when I answer a question like that, I will make the party's stance clear. And I'll either leave out my stance or I'll mention personally, I feel slightly differently. But for the most part, we've had candidates that I'd say to the best of their ability do properly represent the party. Bill brought up the campaign collective, which I really would like to talk about that, because Joshua Bradley was the first to come up with this, and it is a unique way to run campaigns. It's very democratic. So when we come and talk to you, we are taking advice and talking points from basically anyone in the party that wants to work on the campaign. Will have a role that they can fill. We try to run things as democratically as possible. The party could censure us. They did do that with David McReynolds, not when he was running, but for something. Obviously, they could kick us out if we, especially, it would have to be something where we actually are representing the party incorrectly, and it goes like directly against the statement of principles. I don't think that's been very common. We do have a lot of leeway because we aren't a top-down party. Although if the party had like a party person, I would probably be one of those people, because I've been in the party so long and I've been in leadership so long, even though obviously I've never gotten paid to do this. It is kind of what I do. So yeah, they put a lot of trust in us, and I take that very seriously. And I really hope I don't let the party down, because it is such a big responsibility to represent what I think is such an important viewpoint in politics, because we do offer solutions to the biggest problems that are facing Americans today.
Thank you.
So here's a big one. So how is the party funded? I know you don't have any super PACs or anything like that.
Yeah, the party is funded by donations and membership dues. We're a membership organization. So if you're going to be a member of the Socialist Party, you got to pay dues. We do have some limited ability to waive dues for people who have lower incomes. But for myself, I make a fairly decent amount of money. So I pay a fairly decent amount of money to the party in dues on a sliding scale. And that's fine. It's not particularly onerous for me. It's actually less than I would pay if I was paying union dues for the same purpose, which is all right. The party is very small, and so our dues, the amount of money that we earn from dues, is also very small. Our campaign, we have a little bit of financial support from the party itself, but for the most part, we receive small donations from individuals. And also, as I was talking at the beginning with Brian, we itemize every single donation we get. So if you go onto the FEC's website, or if you go onto opensecrets.org, you can see the name of every single person who's given every single cent to our party. And this is not something that most major candidates can say. And that's even most major candidates on the left. I mean, if you look at some of the parties, Brian was mentioning there's some kind of like secret code that refers to donors that's not an actual name. We have names, we have addresses, we have occupations of every single person that's donated to us. So we don't take money from dark money sources. We don't take money from super PACs. We don't take money from organizations. Although someone like if McDonald's or something like that wanted to write us a check for $800 million that we could put McDonald's on, I wouldn't turn that money down. I probably would use that money to build cheap homes for people, but I wouldn't use it to campaign for president, for crying out loud. There's much better things we could use $80 million for. But as long as we could be honest and open about it, I'd be happy to build houses with that money. I wouldn't get elected, but people would have homes at least. But yeah, we're very open and we're very small, and we're completely and totally funded by donations from individuals and also membership dues. As a party, the campaign doesn't receive membership dues. Obviously, we take donations from individuals.
So we're definitely small in terms of financing. I think we're one of the biggest independent, or one of the bigger independent socialist parties in the US. But as far as our overhead, we don't have a lot of staff because, again, we are not a top-down organization, and we are a working class party, which, we have dues that can be afforded by working class people. And there is the possibility for dues waivers, but yeah, it is very self-funded. We don't have any benefactors. We rely on a lot of volunteer labor, and these people really are heroes in my eyes. They really are people that are doing this. They're hardworking people. They work a 9-to-5 job, and they come and they put in several hours for the campaign, and they ask nothing in return. It's really overwhelming to see that kind of generosity and dedication. And if you look at the news and you see just so many horrible things that make you question if there's any good in the world, I would definitely suggest, even if you don't get involved in the Socialist Party, get involved in something, because there really are people out there that are doing good and are giving their all to fix things and to make the world a better place. And it really is inspiring to see that every day. And that's one of the biggest things I get from this campaign.
So with the members making the majority of the donations and the party helping you guys a little bit with your campaign, do you do stuff that would be like, I guess, a multi-pronged approach? Do you do drives to get more people to join? Do you get drives to help people or have people volunteer for your campaign or to the party as a whole? How are you bringing more people through the door, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
One of the best ways to do that is through running a presidential campaign, but we don't only run presidential campaigns. Stephanie can definitely tell you more about electoral success that socialists have had on the local level, especially in Minneapolis, where Stephanie has been part of running, I think, 3 members of the Socialist Party for various positions in the school board and the city council and that kind of stuff. Plus, we have Josh Bradley, who's running for city council in Raleigh, North Carolina. Wayne Turner, who is affiliated with us through our Left Unity study group. We meet every single week and discuss theory books and that kind of stuff. He's running for governor of the state of North Carolina, and he's affiliated with our campaign collective. And William Seashee, who's running for what's called Justice of the Peace in Arkansas, but really that's a county commissioner everywhere else in the country. It's just called Justice of the Peace there. So we have people who are doing campaigning across this country right now from the Socialist Party, and the whole goal of all these campaigns is to get the word out about socialism, to get people to actually consider joining. If you talk to most of the socialists that are currently in the party, they'll tell you that they joined the party as a result of activity around presidential campaigns. I, for example, joined the party around 2000 because of Dave McReynolds, who was running for president. Stephanie is probably fairly similar. She's been with the party for that long. And then a lot of people who are in our campaign collective will tell you about Mimi Soltysik, who ran for president in 2016 and got a lot of individuals really excited about the party. Last election in 2020, we ran Howie Hawkins, who was agreeing with one of our own candidates, Angela Walker, who was running as his vice president from the Socialist Party. So we had a green and red unity ticket at that point. So a lot of people will get involved around presidential campaigns. And I think that that's really one of the best membership drives that we can do, because otherwise our reach is kind of limited. We'll have membership drives around different actions like protests and teach-ins and things like that that get people interested in the party, because we're talking about things that they care about. We also have a lot of very strong campus activism, which gets people involved in the party from colleges across the country. So those are probably the main ways that we do it. But I think that the presidential campaign is a really great way of getting people not only involved with the party, but also starting to organize in their area around various issues.
Yeah, this is something that's always debated every time we have to decide. And I've always been on the side of running someone, because we never get as much free press and interviews and attention and the ability to get our platform out there as we do with a presidential campaign. It really is a great way to generate interest. And of course, one of the most important things we want to do is put this alternative economic system, this alternative out there, so people know that it exists. It's not about us, like Bill has said. It is about the platform and building the party. And we did have some success here in Minneapolis. The last few elections, we ran a candidate for each one. So we got 2 people elected to the Minneapolis School Board, and we got 1 person elected. She's now the chair of the Board of Estimate and Taxation in Minneapolis. And we do have a lot more success when it comes to electoral politics on the local level, because ballot access and funding is such a big hurdle. And even for those races, those were nonpartisan races. I mean, the money that we had to raise for that was just obscene. It really shouldn't be that way. It's such a stumbling block for democracy. But I just want to reiterate that we are a revolutionary party, and we understand that it is unlikely that we'll ever be able to vote socialism into office. That isn't our strategy. It isn't realistic, in my opinion, even though I would obviously prefer that. And I am very dedicated to the democratic process. If we were to actually build a strong grassroots movement that was big enough that we could actually threaten those in power, we would either be destroyed or we would be co-opted, basically, like what happened with the Progressive Party. People talk about how we should focus on ballot access. People don't join the Socialist Party because they see us on the ballot. They join because they see what our campaign's doing, our protest movements, and things like that. And at the same time, they're never going to let us have full ballot access, not when we're running on this platform. We're never going to have the kind of funding we need to actually wage a campaign that could get us to the White House. It's just such a hurdle, and it is by design. It is by design that candidates that really want to represent the working class and advocate for a system that replaces our status quo where a handful of people have all the wealth and power, that does not mean that this isn't a useful and effective strategy. And it doesn't mean that there aren't things we can change in the short term that actually build to our long-term goal of economic democracy and workers owning the means of production.
So like, it would be fair to say then, that like, given the current historical epoch of how people engage in political activity, since you can't, as that funny little German guy once said, since you can't make history in the historical conditions of your choosing, using electoral politics as a way of sort of getting the ideas out that are behind, or the principles, as you suggested, that are behind your platform, is just utilizing what's available in this specific moment as a way of trying to create a space for a different moment where there would be like other avenues that might open up.
Yes,
Precisely. That same funny little German guy also said that if we don't do something like this, then they're just going to crush us even faster. And so this is a way of fighting back while we're building up to the thing that will actually make the change. This is how we stay alive.
All changes that have benefited the working class have come through mass labor organizing and grassroots movement. They haven't come as a result of the owning classes and the rich and powerful and politicians that represent them just deciding to do the right thing. One example is a lot of our environmental regulations today were passed under Nixon, not because Nixon was a staunch environmentalist, but because there was a lot of pressure for that. And that is how the working class has always improved its lot, is through solidarity and labor organizing and grassroots political movements. And I would like to extend that into the electoral arena, but truth be told, right now, unless we can exert enough pressure to radically change campaign finance and ballot access laws, that isn't a realistic prospect. And I think people who focus solely on that are playing into the hands of the system that they're trying to replace, because they're playing by its rules, and its rules are set up for you to lose.
I was listening to this interview between Brianna Joy Gray and Slavoj Žižek. It was like December 2021 or something like that. And because Miss Gray is very prescriptive, like oriented sometimes, and she talks so much about electoral politics, she keeps asking Žižek about strategy. And he keeps telling her, this is not like a mathematical equation, right? You have to sort of see the playing field and like operate accordingly. And she pressed him on it more, and he said, you have to do everything, which is something that when I was listening to you all talk earlier today, that was something that was reiterated 2 or 3 times. Like, you use what tools are available to you at a given point in time. And sometimes the wrong choice can actually produce the right outcome. Like nobody, Obama, like, nobody can say that he was, ever going to be really for the working class, but he still brought healthcare issues to the foreground in a way that, like, when Hillary Clinton tried to do it in '93, she failed at horribly. So you never know what can come out of these moments. That's for sure.
Well, I wanted to add to that. If you read Che Guevara in the very fundamental work called Guerrilla Warfare, he will tell you that revolutionary change is impossible as long as people continue to believe that change is possible through the electoral process. I think it's defeatism to basically say, well, we're not going to be able to win this election, so we're not even going to try. That's, in my opinion, that's a defeatist attitude. The real thing is, look, we're up here saying the right things. We're up here saying this is a problem. We're correctly identifying the problem. We're correctly identifying solutions to that problem, and we're offering those solutions to the vast majority of the people who can hear us. And we're losing anyway. So what this should tell people is that you can say all the right things, you can believe the right things, you can actually be correct with history, you can be on the correct side of history, on the correct side of class politics, and the correct side of everything, environmental politics, race and gender politics. You can be on the correct side of all that, and you're still going to lose, because as Stephanie said, the system here is designed for people who are saying the things that we're saying, or even some of the other people who you've interviewed with the show, who aren't socialists, but who are different political parties. It's designed to keep those people out of the conversation. It's designed to keep us all out of the conversation. And people are like, well, if you just stop running, if you just stop being in the Socialist Party and just like got behind one of these other parties like the Greens, they have the best chance to be elected because they have ballot access in more states than everybody else. So just forget about what you're saying as a socialist and get behind it, because ballot access is really all that matters. They're essentially setting themselves up to lose, because if that's really the only thing that we have is ballot access, then we're never going to win. We're always going to stay outside of the system, and we're always going to be standing outside the system wondering why we don't actually have power. The power doesn't come through the ballot. In this system, the system is designed so we can't actually make a change through the ballot box. It's designed that way deliberately. It's designed that way by design, you might say. And so what we have to do is we have to figure out how to extricate ourselves from the game, because the game is rigged against us. It's not rigged like the Trump people would say, how it's rigged, just to be prejudiced against him because he's Donald Trump. It's rigged in a way to prevent any sort of systemic or foundational change to the system. It's designed specifically to protect itself from the voice of the angered and motivated population. And it's going to stay that way as long as we continue to play that particular game. We're going to continue to stand on the sidelines and wring our hands about why we can't seem to get anybody to listen to us, why we can't get any votes, why we can't get on MSNBC or whatever. And we're not going to be actually making any difference. Whereas if we run and we lose, even though we're correct, then we run again and we lose, even though we're correct. Maybe this time I'll reach 10 people who previously believed that the only change possible was through the ballot. Maybe I'll reach them and show them, hey, this isn't possible. Let's work for something else. We need to promote revolution in this society. We need to fight for change rather than just hoping it'll happen at the ballot box or through some elite who happens to inhabit the White House at this particular time. If we change those minds slowly, and move forward, eventually we're going to disabuse enough people in the society of the notion that our liberal democratic system in this country ever worked for the people, instead of for just the elites and the people who have power. Eventually, we're going to disabuse enough people of that they decide as a group, hey, it's time to do something different. It's time to try something different. We're tired as a society of banging our heads against this stupid wall. And then we will do something different. But it's going to take us fighting and losing, and then fighting and losing, and then fighting and losing, even though we're correct on all these issues, even though socialism is a great solution for a lot of problems that we're facing.
Try, fail again, fail better.
That's right. The Republicans know this. They win by losing all the time. They've been doing that as a tactic as long as I've been alive. And I just wish that people on the left would see that as a valid tactic as well, because the Republicans have had great success with it so far.
I wanted to move to the next question because we were kind of touching on it, but it was not answered succinctly, I guess. So, and you can answer from a candidate's perspective or the party's perspective, or maybe even both. But what are your short-term, your midterm, and your long-term goals? I mean, because it sounds like you guys are running to get attention, but is that, give us an idea what your goals look like.
If you want to take short and mid, I could do long.
Okay. Just in summary, our goal is to build a movement that is capable of moving the society towards socialism. That's basically what it is. But we operate on the strategic, I guess, the tactical schema of educate, agitate, and organize. Educate, we want to educate people and tell them what socialism is and specifically what it is not. For example, Joe Biden is not a socialist. I don't care how many times the Republicans repeat that. He's not a socialist, period. Another thing that socialism is not national socialism. So they'll put like Stalin and Obama and Hitler and say those guys are the same thing. That's ridiculous. For anyone that knows what socialism is, that's utterly ridiculous. We're here to, on the short term, to differentiate ourselves from other adjacent parties who are not necessarily anti-capitalist. We're not the same thing as the Greens. We're not the same as the PSL, but we also at the same time have a lot of points in common with a lot of leftist parties in that, like the Greens, like the PSL, like other left-wing parties, we are set on opposing the two-party system in this country, the duopoly in this country. That is a rigged game that none of us are part of. We never will be a part of it. And we are opposed to that. We are for independent political action and that kind of stuff. And we need to tell people about that. We need to get these ideas about socialism, what socialism is, the definition, which we spent a significant amount of time here during the show on, as well as some of the things that we do. Medium term, of course, we want to get people excited about socialism and get them activated in their areas to show them what we can do as the party, as a movement, show them the things we can accomplish that doesn't necessarily just involve getting ballot access, but also working with other groups in the area to promote the overall goals of socialism within other formations. Like, for example, we would associate ourselves with like environmental justice or social justice issues because we believe in environmental justice and social justice. Like Stephanie said, not so we can go in there and tell people join the Socialist Party. The only way we're going to participate with you is if you come pay dues to the party, but because they just need bodies on the ground. And that's what we should be doing. We should, be working with union movements that are specifically independent or grassroots union movements that are not captured by the Democratic Party. So that would necessarily preclude working with large national units and actually probably more with radical unions and local grassroots unions to say, look, we really believe in organizing your shop and fighting for workers' power. We're going to lend our time and our energy to your movement, that kind of stuff. And also maybe hopefully talking to them about socialism to get them interested in the socialist solutions that our party is offering, as well as socialism in general, to undermine this whole idea that there's no alternative. I'll kick the organized part over to Stephanie, since she has been working at this for so long within our party.
So in 1901, when the Socialist Party of America was formed, these were its main platform point: women's suffrage, barring children under 16 from working, free public education for all, unemployment and social security benefits, and the creation of a public health department, a labor department, a department for occupational health and safety, and the establishment of an environmental protection agency. Now, obviously, I worded this in ways that people will recognize what they're asking for in modern terms. But at the time, all of these were incredibly revolutionary and radical goals that I'm sure the people at the time thought there was no way that they would achieve. But the fact of the matter is they did, and they achieved it the same way working class people achieve anything. It's through the blood, sweat, and tears of working people and popular movements. The truth is that radicals do write the future because we actually interrogate the system and have answers to the problems it causes. Now, I don't know what the future may hold. I know that capitalism is unsustainable. And right now, the way I see it, we have two opposing forces that are trying to pull us in different directions. And I certainly hope that we go in the direction of egalitarianism, of justice and equality, and socialism. I do not want the nationalists, the Christian fascists to win. Obviously, both fascism and communism do tend to bubble up when capitalism is in crisis. And even people who are for capitalism, I think, see this, that capitalism is descending into never-ending spirals of wealth inequality and problems it just does not have the ability to solve. because it can't grow. Capitalism requires infinite growth. You can't grow forever. So something is going to give. And one role, personally, I see myself in making that better world is making sure that I keep hope alive. We do have solutions for these problems, and we do have a system that works. We've seen it work, and it is possible. I just hope that people don't give in to despair and hatred, because things could get better, but they could also get a lot worse. When we descend into doomerism, when we talk about how climate change is real and it's bad, but there's nothing we can do, that only helps the oil companies. Today, we don't struggle for purpose or relevance as socialists. The colossal failures we've seen under capitalism are unmistakable. What's lacking, at least in the US, is a narrative that explains why these failures are happening, explains why people feel like every day their paycheck isn't going far enough, and things for working people seem to be getting worse and worse, while corporate profits and the wealth of the 1% is growing exponentially. We are here to offer better leadership, real alternatives, not half measures or compromises or capitulation to the ruling class. We offer something that no capitalist party will ever be able to match. And the way I see it, because capitalism is unsustainable, it has no future. The question is not when it will die, but if it's going to take humanity with it.
Let me ask you, so when you first responded to us, I talked to my buddy who I always bounce things off, and I told him what the name of the party was, and immediately she said, she asked me about the fact that it was tied, because it's Socialist Party USA, it's tied to the nation state level, but like, we're all smart enough to understand that like the component position of reproduction writ large on a global scale transcends the limitations of the nation state. Now, regardless if it's factions of capital, like at the nation state and then above the nation state, how do you see, like in the context of the long-term goal, how do you see SPUSA in that larger global structure? Is there like relationships that you're building beyond the nation state that are interested in developing the visions that you're talking about for a different world? Because clearly, like if you're talking about socialism, if it's going to function, it will have to be a global phenomenon at some point in time.
The nation state is so closely tied to the functions of liberalism, and liberalism, of course, in economic terms, is capitalism. Capitalism and liberalism and the nation state kind of grew up pretty much at about the same time. If you know your international relations, Treaty of Westphalia is about the same time that we see the emergence of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution in Western Europe. And so consequently, when we talk about socialism, writ large, capital S socialism, of course, it's a international phenomenon. We ourselves right now, currently, for a good example, have declared solidarity with the working people of Palestine. Obviously, it goes without saying that we're not pro-terrorist or whatever kind of label they want to sling on us, but we will always stand with the working people of not only Palestine, who are being bombed into the ground and having genocide committed against them, but we'll also stand with the working people of Yemen who are being attacked. This is a global phenomenon, and attacking working people in Yemen is basically the same thing as attacking working people in the United States. It just takes a different form. It doesn't really make a difference if you're starving in the street or getting bombed by some smart weapon. You're still dying. The war machine is still grinding you into the dust. And so we take this internationalist perspective on capitalism, and we have to, because the problems of the working people in Yemen or in Palestine or in Africa or in Southeast Asia or whatever are the same problems that our working people face, because they have the same culprits behind them that are causing those problems. And we have to consider that every time we consider what we're doing. If it's just going to make us better, as Stephanie had mentioned, Swedish or Nordic socialism, the only way it can provide all those wonderful things for the people of Sweden or Denmark is by exporting the contradictions within capitalism and the mode of production and exploitation in capitalism onto the third world. You see how Sweden treats people who are fleeing crisis in Africa to Northern Europe. They close their doors to them. And it's not that they necessarily are evil. It's just that their economic model requires us to maintain the supply of underfed, of poor, of desperate people around the entire world, including places that we have traditionally exploited, like the third world, the developing world. In the United States, we exploit the hell out of Latin America. We've been doing that for over 100 years as part of our imperial process. So not only do we take this internationalist perspective, we also oppose imperialism wherever and whenever it exists, whether it be from Russia in Ukraine. We oppose that imperialism. We oppose the imperialism of the United States in its response to Russia in Ukraine, because in reality, the problems in Ukraine didn't start when Russia invaded that country a couple years ago. It started long before that, when the United States decided that they were going to spike the football after the Cold War and push NATO all the way to the borders of Russia. They didn't have to do that. We chose to do that. It was a matter of choice. And it was a completely free choice that we could have chosen not to make, but we chose the wrong thing. And so the United States is just as responsible for that business over there as the Russian government. We don't really make a distinction between those two different kind of imperialisms. We're not justifying Russia's actions or anything like that, invading their neighbor. We want peace in Ukraine, just like the people of Ukraine want. But we want peace not because we want to support the Zelensky government by any stretch of the imagination, but because that war is over there killing hundreds of thousands of people, Russian people who are being conscripted in their military, as well as Ukrainian working people who are being subject to bombing and that kind of stuff. So that's why we support peace over there. And we believe that the United States government has no interest in peace in Ukraine, which is why they continue to fund the regime of the Zelensky government. And they continue to give them just enough weapons to maintain the conflict in the status quo state without actually resolving any of the conflict at all. The same way with Palestine, we continue to fund the genocidal government while our president is on TV complaining about how there's not a ceasefire and how Israel needs to pay attention to human rights. We insist they pay attention to human rights so much that we veto any resolutions to that effect in the United States or United Nations General Assembly and Security Council. And so we necessarily have to take this in internationalist perspective, and we do so on a matter of principle within the party and within the campaign. And everything we do also has this mind of how will this affect people of other countries? How can we work in solidarity with other countries to the point where we're not just looking at the benefit for American workers, but we consider the struggle of workers all around the world to be struggles that we ourselves should be engaged in.
Cheers. Just a funny side point on Ukraine, we maintain a system of making money off of the weapons, and you got BlackRock in the side mirror, view,
Yep.
already signed the rebuild,
Right.
contracts. I mean, what a wonderful world we live in. So
That's right. I mean, if you look at Afghanistan and Iraq, when we were fighting wars over there, we didn't lose $1 billion, or we didn't lose $1 trillion, whatever. I think the $1 trillion was the amount. We didn't lose that. That went into the pockets of not only American private military contractors, but also local elites who we were bribing to the tune of suitcases full of money to do our bidding over there and to maintain that civil war. And so I think that the elites are allied, so there's no reason why the workers of the world shouldn't be allied as well.
indeed.
And it does come back to haunt us, not just with police militarization from the weapons surpluses and from us having the IDF train our police forces. We saw it definitely in Minneapolis. This does come back to bite us, and we can't act as if it's just over there. The imperialists may be focusing on people in the Middle East now, but it's always going to be workers, and one day it's going to be you. So even if you don't have a soul and don't care about other working people, their oppression will be your oppression, and they will use the same tools. So, even if it's just out of self-interest, all working people should work to undermine imperialism because they are also victims of it.
One thing I can say is I'm a veteran. I was in the United States Marine Corps for 4 years in the late 1990s, and everyone I served with, 100% of the people I served with who weren't officers, so enlisted men and women who I served with, were all members of the working class, and most of them were in the military because they didn't have a lot of great options at home besides either being in gangs or going to jail or getting shot on the street or being arrested for something. We had people who were from very poor neighborhoods, the military recruits primarily from low-income high schools. You don't see a lot of wealthy children in the military, and there's a real good reason for that, because the military doesn't take those people. The military takes working class kids, and the military uses working class kids as fodder for their wars. And this is just a matter of fact. So when you say that you support peace and you support anti-imperialism, you also have to say I support American troops, because those are people who are just like me, who went into the military for a lot of the same reasons that I went into the military, and who get shot at first before the officers ever will even see combat.
So just to bring us to the end of the Q&A side of it, this is back to a magic wand moment, right? So if there was a change that you could make in our current political process to make things better for voters, candidates, and parties, or I mean, just the system itself in relation to that, what would be at the top of that list?
Well, we get rid of money in politics. First of all, there'd have to be a way to just basically take money out of politics. That really makes the playing field uneven. We'd also get rid of a lot of the systemic barriers that prevent people from actually running campaigns. I would like to see people who have, I don't know how to really say it, like, I would like to see people who have the support of a certain number of people have the opportunity to get their message out to people and let people decide on that. But for the most part, we could also make some systemic changes with regard to instant runoffs, get rid of first past the post, get rid of winner take all, and give people real options in the ballot box where they can select and rank their choices based on how much they prefer those, rather than having to just select one candidate or one option. Which necessarily leads to a lot of wasted votes. They complain about wasted votes in our society, but when you really think about it, if you have an election where it's 50% plus one, that means that 50% minus one, all of those votes, not to mention the ones that didn't even vote, all of those votes are wasted. They might as well not even shown up, because the result is the same. So we'd have instant runoff, ranked choice voting in all elections, from dog catcher on the city or village level to president of the United States, so that people actually have a real option.
Yeah, our democracy truly is, I mean, if you can call it a democracy, is debatable, because it is something that is wholly controlled by the owning classes, and working people have very little say as far as the major themes. But obviously, I would say end capitalism would be the biggest thing. But if that's off the table, I would say end the domination of the two parties, like the two parties of capital that are funded by corporations. I mean, this makes democracy impossible. When dollars have so much influence on public policy, those with the most dollars have the most power. You don't have to be a genius to understand that. There was a study several years ago that mapped public opinion versus policy, and policy almost never followed public opinion, but it always followed wealthiest Americans wanted. And of course, we all know why that is, because they can buy legislation and their policies. They buy the politicians, they buy the elections. And even if you are a candidate that has the best interests of working people at heart, to get elected, you can't enact those policies. You just won't get funded, or you'll get maybe even assassinated, honestly. But
or primaried,
yeah.
You don't have to go to assassination, but yeah.
Well, I have my opinions on Wellstone, and I'm not saying that's the party's opinion, definitely. But anyway, yeah, money in politics is the big thing. The two parties of capital, although they do differ on these wedge issues, on these social issues, I like to say the Democrats would gladly fight a culture war and lose rather than fight a class war, because ultimately they are capitalists, and the Democrats and Republicans tend to agree on things economically, even if they pretend to differ on social issues. But we've all seen when push comes to shove, the Democrats will definitely give up those social issues to maintain capitalism. And I do not trust either party. And I'm going to say this is a little more my opinion than the party's opinion. I do worry about fascism. I do not trust the Democrat or Republican Party to prevent that. I'm sure most Socialist Party members wouldn't disagree with that, but I'm a little more worried about it coming to pass in my generation than I think most party members are. And instead of just blindly voting blue no matter who, when we see the ratchet effect means that things are constantly going to the right, which long enough period of time, obviously, you know where the Overton window is going to be. That's why we need a strong left. That's what has historically been able to keep fascists from getting state power, is a strong left. And they have made sure, the Democrats especially have made sure that that is not a thing. And we are facing the consequences. So when they try to scare you into voting for Democrats, I'm not going to shame people. I know there's people that are really just struggling to survive, and they see the Democrats as the people that are less likely to kill them. If you're a trans person, there are legitimate arguments for that. I'm not going to judge someone for making that choice, but I also would tell them the Democrats are not on your side. Ultimately, they may use you. They have always used marginalized communities and working people for their own goals, but at the end of the day, they are for the wealthy and powerful. They always will be. And Bill and I, and many other socialist candidates as well, are not.
There's a couple things here. The first thing is that when Stephanie mentions that the wealthy actually can buy candidates, in reality, that's pretty much what they're doing. Like actually now that there is no kind of limits with regard to corporate spending, you actually can purchase an election by unlimited donations to a particular candidate, and basically buying the election, where a person who might have good ideas really can't successfully compete against these corporate donations, which just dwarf whatever an independent candidate could put together. You might have someone who actually has good ideas or whatever, but they're not going to get elected because they can't ever get on TV, because they can't afford the cost it takes to advertise their campaign. So no one even knows they exist. They might as well not exist for all the good that their great ideas are going to do. But the one final thing I'll add to this is, when you talk about fascism, the most fascist attitude that a person can have, in my opinion, besides overt bigotry and radical nationalism and all that other stuff, the most fascist attitude that a person could have is the idea that there is no alternative. And this is a very famous thing that Margaret Thatcher said while she was still alive. And I'm glad that she's no longer alive, just for the record. But she said there is an alternative. It's called TINA. It's a principle in neoliberalism, which essentially says that you must, in her case, you must accept liberal economic policies and austerity because there is no alternative. What's the alternative? The alternative is communism, and that's not even a realistic alternative, so we're not even going to discuss that. There is no alternative to liberalism, but it has been re-expressed in our society when George W. Bush said you're either with us or with the terrorists, or Biden said something to the effect, or maybe Hillary Clinton said, if you're a female and you vote for anybody other than Hillary Clinton, there's a special place in hell for you. That's what Madeleine Albright said, who was a surrogate for the Clinton campaign in 2016. There's a special place in hell for you if you have a vagina and you vote for anybody other than Hillary Clinton. You're not really actually a full woman, is basically what she was saying. There is no alternative to Hillary Clinton. You have to either vote for Hillary Clinton or you're voting for the worst possible thing that you could possibly imagine. And then in 2020, Biden ran that same thing, which said, either you vote for me or vote for anyone else in the campaign, or any other thing in the campaign that you possibly want is actually a vote for Donald Trump. There is no alternative. It's a very fascist mindset. So while Stephanie is concerned about the rise of fascism in our lifetime, I would amplify what she says and point out that fascism is already here in a lot of ways, where people are saying, you have no alternative. You either have to vote for Biden or Trump is going to win. And that's the worst possible thing that you could possibly ever imagine. Every single election, they have some kind of existential crisis that they run. And they say that you have to vote for our guy, or else this existential crisis is going to happen. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But that mindset right there, to me, is a very fascistic mindset, because you're not allowed to differ or disagree with the prevailing false dichotomy in this election. You're forced to accept this. It's either like you either vote for Biden or you want to see all puppies die. I mean, that's really the alternative they're giving you. That's not really even a real choice. And so I would say that in a lot of ways, we already have fascism, and fascism is very much alive and well in our country, in this notion that you either have to do what we say, and you can't ever criticize what Biden is doing, even though there's a lot of very legitimate things to criticize him on. You're not allowed to criticize him because any criticism helps Trump. That's a very fascistic mindset. And anyone that adopts that, and I don't have a problem with judging those people are promoting fascism in our society, and they're actually wearing down legitimate conversation, legitimate criticism of our government. They're basically browbeating everyone into accepting the person that they want to be elected. And that's one of the reasons why we're running. We're running because I don't go along with that. I don't believe in that sort of fascistic mindset that's kind of swept our nation, because fear is driving it more than any kind of reason or rationality.
Well, on some level, we totally agree with you, because that's kind of why we've been doing this project for the last several months, because
Don't underestimate how important stuff like this can be, because you are reaching people that no one else would reach. And you know that the mainstream media isn't going to cover this kind of stuff. So don't underestimate how important what you're doing is.
It certainly is important to us, because it's allowing us to get the message out, for sure.
Well, that's why we wanted to talk to you. But I've got one last question. It wasn't on the standardized questions.
Oh no.
Yeah, I know. I'm ambushing. So it sounded like a lot of your goals and a lot of your answers, and I know you talked about, I can't remember the word you used. I think you said assimilated or something along those lines, but you said that you were anti-capitalist. So I guess what I'm wondering is, if you get elected and you don't want to be assimilated and become a capitalist, how, because let's say you're the first socialist to get elected, or someone else into the House, or wherever.
and unlike Eugene Debs, you won't be in prison.
I have an answer for this, because I think Mimi had the best answer for this. And he said something along the lines of, if he got elected, he would have to fire himself the first day, because he would be the head of an imperialist nation. Obviously, our goal isn't to be elected. I don't know if we would stay in office very long if we were elected. I'm sure they would find some way to either prevent us from being sworn in, or, stopping us from getting any power.
Well, let's say you weren't assassinated and you didn't get recalled or whatever. So you were voted in, and now you've got this job to do.
I would probably.
Do you actually quit?
No, I would stay there until they forced me out. I would try to release as much information from the CIA archives as I could. I think the government does hide a lot from the American people, and Bill can talk extensively what we've done in South and Central America, but just the black sites they have, the torture we've been doing. We know the stuff that they admit to. Just imagine the stuff that they don't admit to. I'm not necessarily a conspiracy theorist, but we know how brutal imperialism is. And I think if we did actually get someone in that position, some of that could be exposed. I would have to think about it more, but just first hearing the question, I would try to do as much as I could. And I think releasing that information would probably be one of the first steps. But I don't know. What do you think, Bill?
Well, since of all the people who are currently on this call, probably stand the best chance of getting elected president of the United States. See, that I'm the only one running for president of the United States. I think that if I were elected on day one, the first thing I would do would be to lay out the priorities of our office. I would promise to veto any legislation that came forward that hurt workers, that harmed workers, any legislation that came forward that harmed the environment. And I would do whatever I possibly can. Like Stephanie says, I would try to make as much of a difference as I could from the White House without relying on what the Congress can or can't do. For example, there are plenty of political prisoners that are in prison right now that I would like to free. I would like to free Leonard Peltier, for example. I would like to start the discussion on things around reparations for slavery and for stealing Native American lands, and try to figure out ways to re-empower or reenact treaties that the United States government signed with Native American nations, and work with people who are descendants of chattel slavery in the United States, not only to acknowledge in a formal way, and I could do this as president without any kind of act of Congress or anything like that, to acknowledge the role that Americans played in chattel slavery and the economic benefits we got at the time, and also are still receiving from the legacy of slavery in this country. I don't think any president has the guts to do something like that right now, because that would entail the government start doing policy around it. And I think that they'd be afraid of actually saying that, because now it requires us to act, now that we've actually officially acknowledged that. So in that sense, I could use that office to force the hand of people who don't even want to work on the things that I want them to work with, just because of the fact that I'm saying, look, our government acknowledges this formally, and we really want to try to start to address this massive inequality and this massive injustice that's been done on a part of our use and our benefit for hundreds and hundreds of years, and our continued benefit from exploitation of labor as a result of the legacy of slavery and stealing Native American resources, land, their culture, their history, and everything that goes along with it, and trying to take the first steps to not reconcile, because that suggests that we were together at one point to reconcile, but still to work for conciliation between that, because I think that only if we move together as one, as a group, can we ever like improve this whole society. If I work just for socialism and just for the working class without addressing these other things as well, of course, I'm going to leave a whole bunch of people out, and they're going to be left out in the same place that they've always been in. And the people who have been taking all this entire time are still going to be able to get the lion's share of the benefits. So, I mean, there's a number of things we could do in a very revolutionary nature that don't involve kowtowing to the liberals who are in office. I would seek to utilize that office to the fullest respect without regard to begging the legislature to do what I think is right.
Yeah, Allende govern primarily through decrees, and that's probably what we would end up doing as long as they let us, which probably wouldn't be very long. But I'm actually going to put this question to the collective and see what they say, because I'm curious, and that's actually what I would do in reality, is I would ask people I know and trust for their advice. But yeah,
there's a number of other things we could do as president to actually help the working class. For example, we could really utilize the bully pulpit to actually help workers get unions together. We could show up at union protests and union drives in various sectors of our economy to help that union kind of lend some legitimacy to their efforts. Whereas as a president, you'll draw the cameras to wherever you go, as Trump demonstrates every time he opens his goddamn mouth. If I utilize that office to go help workers organize a shop somewhere, I mean, that's to the benefit of the workers. And the employers might hate me for showing up there, but I mean, I wouldn't be working for the employers anyway. I'd be working for the people of the country. So I think that Stephanie's right that we would have a group of people around us that would give us good advice and hopefully would tell us when we're about to step on a landmine. But at the same time, we as socialists are revolutionaries, and so we should be utilizing whatever tools we can to promote the revolution. And in this case, if we did get elected, that would be one of the tools that we would definitely use.
So
to-
in
to
one
the
example, you do
revolution.
the opposite of what Biden did with the railway workers.
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have inserted myself into that situation, because I think the union had it under, I think the workers had it under control before he jumped into it and basically canked the whole thing anyway. So I think
The
that,
greatest union president in history.
oh yeah, right.
what a joke.
Yeah,
And
the
it
most
isn't just
union.
him, it's the squad too.
Right.
They would
Yeah, they
validate
run
that.
interference. They run interference for the guy. They continue to provide political cover for him. Bernie Sanders is no better, to be completely honest with you. And he's back in the administration's play in Palestine, Israel right now. So
He votes for it. The military budget every year, he votes for it. Definitely. The squad is done. I mean, other than Palestine stuff with those two
Yeah.
ladies, they're the only ones though.
yeah, they can hold signs up at the State of the Union saying "Free Palestine" or whatever, but what are they really doing?
Yeah, it means nothing. Yeah, it's for catharsis. It's not for anything.
They wouldn't be allowed to do something. I think Omar has done more than I expected, and I do appreciate that. But I know that
That's a pretty low bar.
yeah, yeah, it is.
We're at though. It's a low bar time.
So guys, I'm all out of questions, and we ask all the standardized questions. Do you want to get the word out on, where people can donate to your campaign? Do you want to tell anybody where they can get a hold of you or anything like that? Because you can do that right now if you want.
Our campaigns page is spusa2024.org. And from there, we have donation boxes that you can click through to donation. As I mentioned, we make all of our donations public. So if you don't want to be known for donating to the Socialist Party campaign, because your name will indeed go on an FEC list, we can promise that. there's not an option for anonymous donations. But if you want to make a donation, say it proud, donate to us on the website there. Our email address is info@spusa2024.org. info@spusa2024. And on all social medias, we are at SPUSA2024. Facebook, Twitter, whatever. It's our goal to have a great social media presence, and that goal is still in the future for now. But we do have social media accounts and everything like that. Plus, we're on YouTube. You can see our previous interviews and statements that we've made too. So check us out, SPUSA2024.org. And also, let me plug the Socialist Party's website, because after all, we are working with the goal of building the Socialist Party, organizing for that. If you want to read the principles or the platform of the Socialist Party, that's at socialistpartyusa.net. And you can take a look at the platform of the party there. You can figure out what various locals that might be in your area are doing. You can get in contact with local organizers if you're interested in joining the party. There's membership forms there that you can fill out and pay dues to the party. And eventually we hope to have merch you could buy.
How many locals do you have? I meant to ask that earlier.
Stephanie would know the answer to this one.
Oh gosh. I don't know. Maybe about a dozen. Maybe should know that, but I don't know offhand. I just want to reach out to people. When I was a teenager, I'm not going to say how long ago that was, but some time ago, I was in a real dark place. I really did care for humanity, but I saw how horrible things were, and it really brought me down, and I didn't have much direction in my life. And I did find the Young People's Socialist League, which was the youth wing of the Socialist Party at the time. And I don't doubt that it saved my life, because it introduced me to actual solutions to these problems. I've met so many amazing people through the party. It provided structure, and we have social events. We have a reading group. If you don't have experience with even if you don't like politics, there's a lot of people in the party that do not like electoral politics. I'm on the anarchist side, so I tend to be in that camp as well. But obviously I'm doing this, so that says something. I know it's tough for people, especially young people, but there really is more out there. There is hope. You can make a difference. You can meet people who have these same concerns and work together, and you can actually change things, at least on the local level. So I'd invite you to check out our website, check out our principles. We're not going to judge you if you're just starting to learn it. You've been indoctrinated into thinking that, I'm not talking to the podcasters here, they're obviously well versed in this, but some of your listeners, this might be their first exposure to this. We're not going to be judgmental about how much you've read. As long as you come in good faith and treat people with respect, we will help educate you. We'll help teach you the things, the strategies we've learned and working people have learned over generations to build power and change the world. So if you're in that place, whether you're young or my age or you're old, it's not too late. There is something you can do to make a difference. I promise you.
To kind of reiterate what Stephanie said, we have about 11 active locals currently, and there are 11 additional organizers that are currently working to build parties in various other states across the United States. So the number that we have chartered right now is 11.
So listeners, check out the website. If you can't find a local where you are, reach out to them. Maybe you can be the first person in that local. That's all I've got for you. You got anything else?
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate you coming on the show.